Is there racism in Harry Potter? Hey wizards, how's it going? If you're new to the Leaky Cauldron, don't be a muggle. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you can stay up to date with everything that's going on here. Don't forget that you can become a member of the channel and get access to exclusive benefits, like badges that appear next to your name. Use these emojis in episode comments or send your question to caldeiraofurado. Scan the QR code on screen or use the link in the description. With the rumors and now the confirmation of Papa Esidu as Severus Snape in the Harry Potter series, some points have been raised by fans of the saga regarding Snape's story. And how could the character's skin color, now portrayed by a black man, be affected? Some point out that Harry could be seen as a racist person. He doesn't like Snape or get along with him, starting from their first encounter for no clear reason. He even suspects he wanted to steal the Philosopher's Stone. And this would somehow be considered a racial issue in this series. Other comments claim that, for sure, the Marauders are going to be racist, because they pick on Snape just because of his appearance and use his looks to bully him. Besides the fact that Snape was rejected by Lily, who chose James Potter instead of him, these were the main statements I saw on my social media when I posted the news. First, I want to make clear that I believe any discussion on any subject is valid. But are these statements the entirely accurate basis for this discussion? Does racism based on skin color exist in the wizarding world? Well, the way I see things? First, we can't say anything for sure because we haven't had contact with this series yet. We know very little, really very little. Only now have the actors' names been officially announced. And only for some of them, not all. So to say that the topic of race in this sense with Snape will be present in the series, I think is a bit premature. I'm not going to vouch for it here by saying I guarantee this won't happen. No, because following what I'm saying myself, I don't know what's going to happen. We'll only find out by watching it. We have the books as a foundation, but as an adaptation, there will be new elements. Do you think they'll change the character's storyline? Honestly, in this regard, I believe, I'm not saying it's 100% certain. I believe they won't. Now, looking at the Harry Potter books themselves, let's see the basis for these statements. Harry's first meeting with Snape, Harry Potter, and the Sorcerer's Stone. There are quite a few comments saying that Harry doesn't like Snape, that he just doesn't like Snape for no reason. There are many comments, so let's begin. Harry, who was starting to feel warm and sleepy, looked again at the main table. Hagrid took a big gulp from his goblet. Professor Minerva was talking to Professor Dumbledore. Professor Quirrell, with that ridiculous turban, was talking to a professor with black greasy hair, a hooked nose, and sallow skin. It happened very suddenly. The hooked-nosed professor's gaze passed over Quirrell's turban and fixed on Harry's eyes, and a sharp, hot pain shot across Harry's forehead. Ouch! Harry put his hand to his forehead. What is it? Percy asked. Nothing. The pain was gone as quickly as it had come. It was harder to shake off the feeling Harry had under the professor's gaze, a feeling that he really didn't like Harry at all. Who's that professor talking to Professor Quirrell? He asked Percy. Oh, you already know Quirrell, huh? No wonder he looks nervous. That's Professor Snape. He teaches potions, but that's not what he truly wants. Everyone knows he's after Quirrell's job. Snape knows a lot about the dark arts. Harry watched the professor for a while, but Snape didn't look his way again. Well, here we can already see that Harry doesn't just dislike the professor for no reason or without cause. First of all, Harry doesn't have that feeling. He has the feeling that the professor doesn't like him, not that he doesn't like the professor. And that his scars simply hurt at the moment when Snape looked at him. Percy says he wasn't surprised Quirrell was nervous around Snape. That Snape knew a lot about the dark arts and wanted his job. Quirrell's job in this case, right? So, adding all that up, his scar hurting at the moment the professor looks at him, which we know later was just a coincidence. Because it was actually Voldemort under the turban. Okay, but at that moment we didn't know that. Combining the pain from his scar, which Harry knew came from Voldemort, the dark wizard who killed his parents and tried to kill him. So he feels something bad in that mark left by Voldemort, a dark wizard. Percy says he wasn't surprised that Quirrell was nervous around Snape, saying that Snape knew a lot about the dark arts. See, Harry's feeling is there for a reason, right? He feels the professor dislikes him due to Snape's look, his scar pain, and Percy's info. It's not something random. So far, everything's fine. And then, in Harry's first potions class with Snape, Snape humiliates Harry. Snape literally humiliates Harry for no reason, completely for no reason. And that's when Harry is sure that Snape doesn't like him. And Snape is really unfair in that class with several Gryffindor students, including Neville, who gets nervous, drops the potion, spills it, and ends up with boils. Snape calls him an idiot and sends him to the hospital wing. So at that moment, how could anyone think Snape is a nice guy? Those saying it was for no reason are ignoring all this. It definitely wasn't, guys. Snape shows himself to be a real terror at that moment, a real terror. Harry's first impression comes from his scar pain and what Percy said. He arrives at class and Snape humiliates him for no reason, even though Harry hadn't done anything and didn't know him. From that moment on, he starts to be wary of Snape. And then there's also the incident with Fluffy, right? When Harry notices Snape's hurt leg. And he doesn't just randomly suspect that it was Snape who went to Fluffy, who tried to get past him. He hears Snape talking to Filch. Filch is bandaging Snape's leg, and Snape is saying how hard it is to pay attention to three heads at the same time. Discussing the dog, then Harry says, wait, something's wrong. What was he doing when the troll was there, entered the castle, and he went there with the dog? Combining this information with the professor's attitude and behavior, that's why he suspects. It's not just for no reason. It's not just because he doesn't like Snape. It's not. That's a false narrative. It's not completely for no reason. Not to mention that after the incident at the Quidditch match where Harry's broom is cursed. Man, there's no way. Even the most attentive reader believes that it's Snape who's behind everything. Suddenly, people in all the stands were pointing at Harry up high. His broom had started to swerve from side to side and he could barely hold on. Then the crowd screamed. The broom had made a violent lurch and Harry was thrown off. He was now hanging on, holding himself up with only one hand. Did something happen to the broom when Marcus blocked him? Seamus whispered. It can't be, replied Hagrid, his voice trembling. Nothing can interfere with a broomstick except for very powerful dark magic. No kid could do that to a Nimbus 2000. When she heard that, Hermione grabbed Hagrid's binoculars, but instead of looking up at Harry, she started scanning the crowd, extremely agitated. What are you doing? Ron groaned, pale-faced. I knew it, exclaimed Hermione. Snape, look! Ron grabbed the binoculars. Snape sat in the middle of the stands across from them, eyes locked on Harry and muttering non-stop. He's doing something. He's jinxing the broom, said Hermione. In other words, Harry had every reason to be suspicious of Snape. He had every reason, absolutely every reason. It wasn't just about his appearance or a quick judgment. That really wasn't the case. So for me, this already completely dissolves that concern about Harry being seen as prejudiced because he doesn't dislike Snape for no reason. Because that's not how it happens. It's not like he dislikes Snape for no reason. And I'm not making this up, guys. It's in the book. You can pick up the book and read it yourself. Now, Snape and the Marauder. This was definitely the most frequently mentioned point. That the Marauders are supposed to be racist. They stated, like, the Marauders are supposed to be racist because they bullied Snape because of his appearance. Do they use Snape's appearance to bully him? Yes, completely. But that wasn't the main reason. That's not true. It's not true that this was the main reason. In fact, the first meeting, the first contact Harry had with Tiago was like that. Snape was walking hurriedly down the corridor of the Hogwarts Express while the train rattled through the fields. He had already changed into his school robes, maybe taking the first opportunity to take off his horrible Muggle clothes. Finally, he stopped at the door of a compartment where a group of noisy boys was talking. Huddled in the corner by the window sat Lily, her face pressed against the glass. Snape opened the compartment door and sat down across from the girl. She gave him a brief glance and turned her attention back to the window. She had been crying. I don't want to talk to you, she said in a tense tone. Why not? Tunya hates me because we saw that letter from Dumbledore. So what? She shot him a displeased look. So what if she's my sister? She's just a... He cooled down quickly. Lillian, too busy discreetly drying her eyes, didn't hear him. But we are going, he exclaimed, unable to contain the excitement in his voice. That's what matters. We're going to Hogwarts. She agreed, wiping her eyes, and despite not wanting to, gave a half smile. You'd better get into Slytherin, said Snape, excited to see her less sad. Slytherin? one of the boys who was sharing the compartment with them and, until that moment, hadn't shown the slightest interest in Lily. And Snape looked to the side when he heard that name, and Harry, whose attention had been completely focused on the two by the window, saw his father, thin, with black hair like Snape's, but with that indefinable air of someone who had been well cared for, even adored, something that was clearly missing in Snape. "Who wants to go to Slytherin? I think I'd quit school, wouldn't you?" James asked a boy sprawled on the seats across from him, and with a jolt, Harry realized it was Sirius. Sirius didn't laugh. "My whole family was in Slytherin." "Wow," said James. "I thought you were cool." Sirius laughed. "Maybe I'll break tradition. Which would you choose?" James raised an invisible sword. "Gryffindor, home of the brave." "Like my father," Snape scoffed, and James turned to him. "Is there a problem?" "No," Snape replied, though his mocking smile suggested otherwise. "If you prefer to have more muscle than brains. And where are you hoping to go?" "Since you have neither," interjected Sirius. James burst out laughing. Lily straightened up, blushing, and looked from James to Sirius with a look of displeasure. "Come on, Severus, let's look for another compartment." James and Sirius mimicked in her superior tone. James tried to trip Snape as he passed by. "See you later, Snivellus," a voice shouted as the door slammed. The scene dissolved again. This is Snape's very first encounter with the Marauders. There's not even a mention of James and Sirius mocking Snape's appearance. On the contrary, they simply ignore Snape and Lily there, and they only start exchanging barbs when Snape talks about Slytherin, defends Slytherin, and says he wishes Lily would be in Slytherin. They do call Snape greasy, yes, but the book itself says that Snape's appearance was kind of sloppy. He had an appearance of someone who wasn't taken care of, unlike James, who was all pampered. That has nothing to do with skin color. How many times, in your own experience, did you look at another kid and immediately notice their clothes were kind of shabby, the collar was messed up? You'd get the impression like, man, they're not well cared for. Like in my experience, that was common. You see that the point where they start mocking Severus Snape, wanting to talk back to him, is when he mentions Slytherin, a house that was openly known for its twisted values for valuing blood purity for having dark wizards, right? Being known for the large number of dark wizards, so yes, there was definitely some prejudice against Slytherin. Especially from the Gryffindors. We know this from reading the books. It's very clear. Kako, are you saying the Marauders never discussed Snape's appearance? Is that what you mean? No, that's not it. The Marauders did use Snape's appearance to make fun of him, but that wasn't their main motivation. They did start making fun of him, yes. But that was after they had already become enemies with Snape. That wasn't what made them start bullying him in the first place. And Snape was always there too, talking back, always trying to set up Tiago, trying to get Tiago expelled. Mainly because Tiago and the Marauders, they saw Snape very much as an antithesis, right? They were really antagonistic since Snape liked the dark arts. Clearly that's obvious, that's not a secret. Snape liked the dark arts. He hung out with people who had really bad thoughts about half-bloods, muggles, and muggle-borns, and he also shared those same thoughts. Lily was the only mudblood he hung out with, and she also didn't like the people Snape hung out with. So, you see, it has nothing to do with appearance or color. It has much more to do with the context of everything that happens. That's why, back in that first video I made, when I said that Snape being black wouldn't change the narrative, in my view it wouldn't change his narrative, it's exactly because of that. Because everything happens involving character, involving the narrative, involving the events, not just appearance. Saying it's only about appearance is making it very shallow. That's not what happens in the story. It's not only about appearance, though they do use it. They say Snape has a big nose and call him greasy for his oily hair, among other things. But at no point is it just about that. You know, that's the point I'm trying to bring to the debate, to the conversation. That you can't just sum it up as, so now the Marauders are called racist, just for talking about appearance. Man, it's not just about that, you know? It's not just that. You can read the books, you'll see. It's not just that. Tiago also says something in Order of the Phoenix. It was more because Snape existed that they messed with him, right? That's because they already hated each other. It's not just because of the way he looks. He's not saying, oh, it's more because he exists, because of his appearance. It's just because they already hated each other. Since the first year at Hogwarts. What did he do to you? He just exists, that's it. And now comes the question I asked at the beginning of the episode. Does racism as we know it in the real world, in the Muggle world, exist in Harry Potter? For wizards? The answer is simple. No, this type of racism doesn't exist. So you're saying Harry Potter has no racism? Among wizards, no. This kind of racism based on skin color doesn't exist. And you can look through all the books and you won't find it. You'll find wizards being prejudiced about blood purity, about marginalized creatures. Pure blood wizards, they're prejudiced against Muggle-borns, half-bloods, non-human creatures like centaurs, merfolk, goblins, and house elves. So much so that when Voldemort takes over the Ministry of Magic and there's that puppet government, the statue there shows wizards standing over Muggles, not white wizards over black people. No, that's not the case. That doesn't exist. This kind of racism doesn't exist in Harry Potter. What exists is the prejudice about blood purity. There are even black wizards who are supremacists, like Zabini and his mother, who are wizards that value the ideology of blood purity. And they are black. That's why, for me, it doesn't even make sense to say that this kind of racism would exist in the story, you know? So, that's why, for me, ever since the first rumor about Snape came out, that view doesn't make sense. Because, man, it's clear in the books that this kind of racism doesn't exist, so why would they put it in the series? Then the question could be, what if they change it in the series and add it? Then, my friends, that's not up to me, it's up to them. I think it's unlikely they'll do that. Honestly, I think it's unlikely. Is it impossible? Man, I know it's impossible for me to do it, and I'm not capable of doing it. Now, as for them, I wouldn't bet on it. Honestly, I wouldn't bet on it, but knowing the story, I think it's unlikely. Kako, but the audience might see it that way and interpret it as racism. But then, my friends, the audience can interpret it any way they want, anything, any context. What I believe is that they know the responsibility they have in their hands. So they'll probably use some device in the script to make it very clear. Just like in the books, it's made very clear that this kind of racism doesn't exist. They can make it clear in the series too. They can clarify that the prejudice comes from pureblood wizards who care about purity and discriminate against any family or person who isn't pure. Man, the Weasley family is white, red-haired, and they're considered the biggest blood traitors. They were persecuted, just like Muggle-borns, during Voldemort's regime, back in the Second Wizarding War. They even had to go into hiding. Having Snape himself played by a black actor will really strengthen this idea that supremacy and blood purity are different from skin color. Because he's a wizard played by a black actor, in this case he'll be a black wizard in the series, and he's a supremacist. And so, I think there's a good chance that Hermione will be played by a black actress. So, we're going to have the complete opposite, with two wizards of the same ethnicity. Two black wizards, right? We'll probably have a black Snape and Hermione. A black supremacist in Harry Potter values pure blood status, showing color isn't relevant. And a Muggle-born witch who is oppressed for being Muggle-born, not for being black, but for being Muggle-born. And then she fights for marginalized creatures like house elves. She has a full awareness of what is wrong, organizes herself, and tries to fight against it. We also don't know if any Marauders will be played by a black actor, so what if they are? If so, it further suggests this type of racism isn't present in the wizarding world. I'm not denying that racism exists, it does. It's disgusting, it's ridiculous, it's something that needs to be fought against. I'm not talking about the real world, I'm talking about within the story of Harry Potter. So that's why, for me, all these points, all these arguments don't make sense. And of course, what I'm saying here isn't an absolute rule. You don't have to just agree with what I'm saying. You can share your point of view here in a polite way, of course. But I'm talking about the things that are in the book. You can see that it's what's in the book. Just like I said in that other video about Snape, that his skin color wasn't important to the narrative. And there were people twisting it, saying that I didn't say he was white. Oh no, Kako is saying that Snape isn't white in the book. That wasn't true. Also, none of them actually say his face was white. That doesn't mean he wasn't actually white. The book's description is that he was white. Okay, that's not what I'm saying, understand. Before you comment anything, understand what I'm saying. When I said that people were using the argument that he was pale and had sallow skin, that's not an exclusive characteristic of white people. It really isn't. It really isn't. Are you upset with me? Go complain to the old dictionary. It's not. Snape is white, yes, in the books. But I showed throughout that video how many times he's mentioned and how very few times his skin color is actually talked about. which isn't relevant to the story. That was all. And that's my point of view on why I don't see a problem with a black actor playing Snape. That's it. Don't agree? That's fine. Think I'm wrong? That's fine. Did you think the choice was crap? That's fine. It's your right. What I find funny is most of these people say that. It's not about freedom of speech or any of that. And when freedom of speech comes from someone who's saying something they don't agree with, automatically that person is wrong. They're not allowed to speak, you know? And in that video, I said, I'm not here to change anyone's opinion. I don't want to change anyone's opinion. No, I'm just saying what I believe, what I think. In my view, that's not a big problem. Would I prefer Snape be portrayed more faithfully to the book in the series? Yes. Just because it won't happen doesn't mean my world is over, you know? Just because it's not gonna happen doesn't mean I'm gonna stop watching the Harry Potter series. That my life was ruined, that my childhood is over, or anything like that, you know? No, I don't see things that way. I don't see the world that way. For me, there's really no problem at all. And those are the points. Those are the points. Anyway, so I believe that these statements are, yes, a bit hasty. Not that they're not valid. Questioning is valid, talking about it is valid, but making a statement, I think that's hasty. Like making a final decision and saying, no, they'll be racist, and Harry will be too. Harry doesn't dislike Snape without reason. It's not. We saw it here together. You can grab the books to check for yourselves, okay? Go ahead. So that's it. Color-based racism because of skin color doesn't exist among wizards. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, leave your like, leave your comment. And like I said, man, do you disagree? Feel free to leave your comment respectfully. It's fine. Let's share ideas and talk. I want this space to be a place for people to exchange ideas, you know? This isn't for people to insult each other, but many do, right? They took my video about Snape. Funny how in your video about wanting changes in the series, you never mentioned wanting Snape to be black. I didn't say that because in the book Snape is white. That's not why the character being played by a black actor is an issue for me in the series. It wouldn't even make sense for me to say, wow, I want Snape to be played by a black actor. I was basing myself on the book and its characteristics. Repeating myself again because that's how the internet is. It's exhausting to say things over and over, yet people still don't get it. Would I like Snape to be faithful to the descriptions in the book? I would. But just because he's not doesn't mean my life is over or I can't find another interesting perspective in the series. One thing doesn't cancel out the other. I'll see you in the next episode of The Leaky Cauldron. If you like this episode, like I said, right, leave a like. If you didn't like it, don't leave one either. You do whatever you want. I'll see you in the next video here. Mischief managed. Until then.